Hi, everybody. Today I have the distinguished honor of having Dr. Taras Kuzio with me to discuss the Ukrainian-Russian war. And I just wanted to introduce him briefly. Dr. Kuzio is an expert on Ukrainian political, economic, and security affairs. In 2010, he predicted the Russian annexation of Crimea that would result from the ousting of President Yanukovych, and currently is an associate with the research and a research fellow at the Henry Jackson Society. There are two books that I found regarding this issue that you can find on Amazon. The links will be below.
The book on the right, The Crisis in Russian Studies, can be actually downloaded free of charge. So if your viewers go to the website of that publishing house, they can be downloaded free in PDF.
Let's talk a little bit about the Chinese, the big elephant in the room, because when we discussed prognosis, we did not consider China, and China appears to be resolute on joining Russia. It is not lost on me that whatever position China is taking now, or seems to be inching towards, has been well thought of right before this conflict because of Putin's meeting with Xi Jinping, and I suspect that that was clearly on their minds, and they have probably made up their mind in which direction they will align. If this happens, what do you think is gonna unfold?
I think this is a very complicated issue, the whole Chinese question, because I don't think it's completely black and white. I think you're right that the Chinese and the Russians have an alliance based on their anti-Americanism, on their opposition to what they consider to be the unipolar world. And that anti-Americanism gives them some kind of basis upon which, where, for example, the Chinese are blaming the West for this crisis, for this invasion. At the same time, Russia needs China more than China needs Russia. And Russia clearly is the younger brother in the relationship. And the very fact that a few days ago the US government released intelligence to say that the Russians have gone to the Chinese asking for or requesting military support, military equipment, shows to what degree Russia is a younger brother in the relationship. I mean, what kind of great power are you if you're coming with a begging bowl to China? And you don't have the military resources to defeat Ukraine.
China. You mean Russia is the junior partner?
Yes, Russia is the junior partner, no question. Russia is the junior partner, the younger brother. Also, China will be looking with horror at Russia because the Russian army has been shown to be not very good, and that will reflect on how China will perceive Russia. It will perceive Russia as even more as a younger brother, even more as a kind of a bit of a fake great power, except for nuclear weapons. And so that lack of respect, I think, will grow. I don't think that China is interested in completely helping Russia to, for example, evade sanctions. China wouldn't get anything from it. Because then Chinese banks, Chinese companies would lose legitimacy, lose face, and also they would be open to sanction by the US. The US already warned them about that. So I think they're going to be cautious about helping Russia on this. You could also argue that an isolated Russia is good for China. Because it basically confirms that China's on the rise. China's the dominant competitor or opponent of the US. I mean, the way the Chinese see the 21st century is that it's a battle for supremacy between them and the United States. Russia's a sideshow. That's how they see it. I mean, so I think the relationship between Russia and China. By the way, they don't have a defense pact. There's no like military agreement that they would come to each other's aid. I think the big impact of this invasion will be on Chinese attitudes to Taiwan and the West. Because if both China and Russia believed that the West would be weak in its response, the West, they have this nationalistic image of the West as weak, divided, and in decline. Western culture is, in decline. It's not robust anymore. America's in decline. And so they expected a kind of a weak and divided response. They were both wrong. And I think the Chinese were in particular quite surprised. So if the Western response had been, as they predicted, weak and divided, that I think would have been more of a threat to Taiwan. Because then the Chinese would have said to themselves, oh, well, when we decide to take Taiwan, the West is going to be also weak and divided. So, but now the Chinese are going, whoa, maybe we need to back off and think about this. And partly that's related to how the Russians and Chinese have a different mentality. The Russian leaders like Putin are angry, very kind of chaotic. They're disruptors. They're spreaders of chaos. Their anger translates into military aggression against their neighbors, who they believe is just a proxy war to fight the West. The Chinese are far more stable. They're far more cautious. They even have, I think, more of an interest in the more stable international environment. Russia does not. And that, I think, is a product of that China's a rising power, Russia's a declining power. Now, the Chinese must be looking at this and thinking, well, the Western sanctions against Russia are going to make Russia even more of a declining power, because Russia is now being cut off from the world economy, from the global economy in every way possible. And that is going to have a tremendous impact on all sorts of areas. For example, the oil and gas industry in Russia contributes about 40% of the Russian budget. So 50% of trade money. That is going to go into decline. The West will wean itself off Russian oil and gas. We don't know how much, but how quickly. But using various means such as LNG, maybe nuclear power in some countries, other kind of wind and other kind of power. But certainly there is now a realization, particularly in places like Germany, which always wanted to have good relations with Russia, who believed in those good relations, is the need to have no oil and gas exports. Russia has no other place to sell that oil and gas. There are no pipelines to China. There's one pipeline to China. So Russia would need to build lots of new pipelines to sell the oil and gas that it now sells to the West, to sell it to China if it wants it.
Or China could, yeah.
But you would need to build, Russia doesn't have ships to transport the oil, doesn't have the pipelines. Because since Soviet times, all the pipelines for the export of the Russian oil and gas was to Europe. And not the other way.
But China could do so.
Well, sure, it could do, but this takes time, right? And straight away, that also then reinforces the unequal relationship between Russia and China.
Yeah, I completely agree that Russia would be the junior partner. I think, in fact, that is probably part of Putin's motivation to start annexing countries, because he knew an upcoming geopolitical divide was coming, and he wanted to present himself as an equal partner in such a alliance, and so he had to strengthen his hand. But the question here is, to me, it seems like China's calculation here is to In fact, they probably welcome that Russia is weakened, because this way they can just turn Russia into a puppet regime,
Right.
and use it simply as a resource for oil and wheat.
Right. Sure. That could be the case. China has a bit of a double standards problem though here. On the one hand, Russia is a close ally in the battle against so-called unipolar world and against the United States. But on the other hand, what Russia's doing goes completely against any Chinese nationalistic view of the state. China's, a very staunch supporter of the territorial integrity of states, very hostile to separatism. And so what Russia's doing is actually undermines everything that China allegedly stands for. And it doesn't like it when people start calling China hypocrites, a bunch of hypocrites. So what's been interesting is that in the late, since the invasion began, the UN votes, China's begun to abstain. Previously, prior to the invasion, China would support Russia on votes over the Crimea. Completely hypocritical, of course, because if Russia can grab the Crimea, why can't somebody else grab Tibet or somebody else? But China's already, so there's already a move there to say, whoa, this is going too far, and hence why only 4 countries supported Russia at the UN, and the usual suspects: Belarus, Syria, North Korea, or whatever, and maybe one other country I can't remember. But the very fact that China's not voting in favor of this, I think, is already not a good signal for Moscow. I think on that. So China's playing its own game. Of course, it will use Russia for oil and gas, maybe to attack the West. It'll join with Russia against that. But on other areas, it's going, whoa. Okay, you're on your own here. Look, China's out. China's pursuing its own national interest. It's not pursuing Russian interests. Of course.
Yeah, but another thing that one has to contemplate is the fact that China, if it does in fact align itself in this situation, in this conflict, they bring themselves into the line of fire of a nuclear deterrent. So basically, while they would be the only winner of a devastating nuclear war or interchange between Russia and the West, they currently kind of seal their fate in terms of if that ever happens, they would go down as well.
Well, I think that if you're a Chinese, communist and leader and Chinese nationalist, you are, I'm sure, strongly of the belief that the future is ours. The future is Chinese. Whether that's going to be true or not doesn't matter, but that's what they believe. So if they believe that, they do not want a nuclear war, because they want to inherit the world as it is. And therefore they want stability, because they think that eventually they'll come out on top against what they see as declining United States. So actually they may be in the position of trying to calm the Russians down, or to sort of say, well, come on, maybe we should try. You should try. Certainly, I think some Western countries, including the United States, believe that that China could be the only country that could maybe have some influence over Vladimir Putin. Whether China wants to do that is another question, and what would China demand from the West for it to do that is another question as well. But so China's going to play its own game.
Yeah, that's very interesting. It adds kind of a dimension into this whole thing. But
because this is a global crisis. I'm writing a paper at the moment where this is what happening in the invasion of Ukraine is affecting everything. I have like 10 different subject areas I'm writing about. It literally is affecting all sorts of areas that you wouldn't think of. For example, Ukraine and Russia are big wheat exporters.
Right.
And a lot of that wheat goes to the Middle East and Africa. and that's going to have tremendous impact on those countries because the price is going to go up. There's going to be a shortage, and that could lead to political unrest in some of those countries.
Yeah, yeah, it's something to definitely be looking at.